and I don't understand, what is the difference between the semantic indexing and the discussions that people are having with the open access linking?
So the word semantic is I'm trying to think of a similar word in the number of times it's used in different ways. Mm-hmm. So I've seen semantic indexing or the semantic web described as little more than a standard library subject index. Mm-hmm. And for me, okay, there's no policeman telling you that you have to use semantic in one way or the other, but to me that's kind of a cop-out. Mm-hmm. What I mean by semantic indexing is metadata about metadata, understanding what a concept is and allowing that concept to interact. So if I can give you a practical example, we have a database on the Civil War, and you can ask that database, give me all battles fought south of the Mason-Dixon line in which more than 300 Confederate soldiers were killed. Mm-hmm. And we can do that because we developed this concept of a battle. We identified 3,647 battles, I think it was, that were fought in the Civil War. And of course you have arguments about what's a skirmish and what's a battle, but we decided that's what the battle was. And then we went and collected all the metadata pertaining to those battles. And so it's kind of cool. That for me is true semantic indexing, because I'm not indexing just by subject, but I'm indexing about the metadata about that subject. In the medical field, similar things exist. So if you want to ask a question like, give me all successful phase 2 clinical trials of AZE inhibitors that happened in Europe between 1985 and 2000, that is a semantic query. A lot of the subject queries are basically, give me all documents on subject X. Well, that's not really a semantic search in my opinion. I mean, it is in the sense that semantics are about meaning and subjects are about meaning, but that's not the same thing. On one side, you're basically allowing the meanings to interact with each other and yield a different kind of query.
And the semantic search that you're talking about is really more the way we ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, it's always been really strange. Why can't I ask the OPAC for all women authors? I mean, that's a pretty basic question, isn't it? All the women authors, please. Or all the authors who were younger than 20 when they wrote. Or all African-American playwrights. I mean, those are pretty basic questions. But no, the OPAC's focused on the physical artifact. So you can't even ask the OPAC, give me everything written in 1860. They'll give you everything published in 1860. They'll give you everything copyrighted in 1860, but the date is date of physical artifact, not date it was written.
Is this something that discovery systems ought to be looking at closely?
I think so. Well, actually, no, I'd rather they didn't, because that's an opportunity for Alexander Street. I'd like to keep that one myself.
I think you want to give a presentation on this at Charleston, because you're talking about the difference between how things are cataloged now and how they could be cataloged in the future. And I don't know if RDA is, if RDA is going in that direction to a certain extent or not, but I mean, I think it'd be important for everybody to see the difference between what you're saying in a very graphic, demonstrative.
Well, we can demonstrate. A lot of the materials that Mike Keller presented on earlier have to do with some very, very intractable, difficult problems. So Tim Berners-Lee wrote the first article on the semantic web, I believe, in 1999. So what's that, 12 years ago? And since then, there's been an enormous number of efforts to get this to work. And they're trying to solve problems like, why isn't there an entity on the web like a hotel room? And an entity on the web like my calendar, so that I can say, on the day that I'm free and I want to be in that hotel room, automatically now, it's available and measured up together. Now, if you could solve that problem, my goodness, Orbitz and Expedia and all these companies would have a lot of money to be made. But in the library world, it translates to who, what, when, where. Those are the questions that the students want to ask. They don't want to ask, what artifacts do you have that were published in 1850, they want to ask who said what in 1850.
Exactly.
And if you look at the very nature of an author or an editor in a marked record, typically it won't list the subordinate authors. So a simple question like, did Churchill ever refer to Charleston in a speech? Well, you can't even find a book that actually has the speeches unless you look at a subject index and see if there's actually been a tag speech put on it. And the truth is, most of those speeches are embedded in other works. And those works are catalogued like great speeches of the 20th century. Or,
and then you have to search through them.
You have to search through them.
Trying to sift that
is not going to happen. And that comes from a misunderstanding of the semantic constructs that people want to find, like a beginning and end of a letter, or a diary entry over a particular day or month.
This strikes me as being very labor intensive, doing this kind of cataloging. Who's going to do the work?
I think that it's going to get easier. At Alexander Street, most recent in-depth semantically indexed database is a local and regional history database. It's 6 times the size of one of our early databases and costs no more. It costs no more because we've got that much faster and better. The machine-aided indexing can help. Processing speeds can help. But the short answer is that writing books is pretty time-consuming and labor-intensive too. Finding out what's in them, sure, there's a lot of improvements we can make. And what Mike and others have been talking about are ways to systematize and organize it. But for what we found is that a headlong dive into a discipline, like say the Civil War, we can actually do the work. But it's because we're not doing every war ever, which would be an even better a database. But no, we're just going to do the Civil War. That's American Civil War at that.
So are there standards that you're using when you do this kind of metadata?
Yeah, we set standards up ourselves, and we learn from those standards that are already there. So controlled vocabularies, very important thing. And in some cases, the standards are already there. Geotagging, oh, what a great standard that is.
Thank you, Stephen. We very much appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule here at the conference to come and talk to us. It was a delight, and we learned so much. Thank you.
Well,
as we always do.
Well, I have a huge multiple thanks. This is my 15th Charleston. It is, in my opinion, I've got to be careful because I don't want other vendors learning just how good Charleston is. But there's enough vendors already. But it is, in my opinion, the preeminent show in libraries. It's the one where people ask difficult questions like, seems like your pricing's too expensive. That's a really, really good forum, and I think it's actually significantly advanced the profession by enabling people to engage in that dialogue. So I thank you collectively and individually for inviting me and for all the Charlestons that you've put on.